So good morning, guys. So we've got the kind of what I would say is probably one of the last four best in town, or the last four best in town, the tutorial here for ARC 252 here today. And I've just got a couple things that I wanted to tidy up. I had some questions in class about a couple things, and I want to make sure we get those covered. Obviously, we've only got 3 days before the deadline here. If you did miss class on Wednesday, I did push our deadline just by 2 days. So if you need to take some time, tidy things up, get everything looking right, take that time. Sunday night, 11:59 is now the current updated deadline. I didn't want to give us too much time. We need to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. So for now, I did have some questions about the roof annotation. So how do I get the slope and the percentage on there? The parapet cap, Toposolid, so the actual grading of the site. I'd like to cover one thing, just super quick refresher on curtain wall. It's just like a one-step thing. There are some challenges it look like with the doors. And then printing. So how do we actually print the PDF drawings? So that being said, let's just go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get in here. So the first thing are the roof annotations. So the roof annotations being two things. One is going to be this little doohickey here, this piece of triangle. So we got this little triangular zone here. And really all I was trying to get to for us here was a brief idea on what are called crickets up on the roof. So this is something that I find relatively challenging to model in Revit, and oftentimes it's simpler just to get it into what's called a annotation. So we can just do it as an annotation rather than get into the actual three-dimensional modeling of each of these pieces on the roof. The second thing, we probably want to understand how to get these little bad boys up here. So we got little slope. And again, this is just going to fall under the annotation tool of our Revit suite. And the last thing that we'll get to is the last thing that we get to when it comes to the roof is going to be this little parapet cap here. It's pretty hard to see in this, excuse me, in this plan view. But if I was to go from our plan view up to our 3D view, you should see pretty quickly we've got this wonderful little 3D parapet cap with these great joins, they're called. And this is done using what's called a sweep. So this is a sweep. And if you could, before we get started here, download the sweep profile. So there's going to be a parapet cap profile that exists as part of our family to get this looking the way that we want it to look. Take a look on Blackboard, it's there. So this is really just, you got to download it, and then we'll go through how to get it onto the overall roof. Good stuff. So let's start here. Let's start with the easy stuff. So we've got, let's start with the annotation. How about we do that first? So jump into our Revit document. So this will only work if you've got your slopes already set up. If it's 0 and it's a flat roof, it's going to be 0. So this is a low slope roof. We did this fairly early on, probably the second week here in class, and we should see a little anywhere between 1.98 and 2%. Revit is bang on. So even though we did the calculation for 2%, it's giving us 1.98 because we're probably a little bit out on the north side or the south side. I would argue this is 2%, but let's get in here. So roof levels. So I've already got a couple of them drawn. You can see them on the screen here. What we want to do is I'm just going to go over here where there's not as many. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump up to the annotation ribbon here, annotation ribbon, click on that, and we should see a couple of items in the dimension panel. So there's a couple items in the dimension panel. We know aligned, we know angular, but maybe we haven't just quite used some of these other pieces here. So there's spot elevations. So spot elevations are going to give us in the z-axis, above a reference point, how high are we? And then why don't I just demonstrate that? So I'm not going to save. But we can see here 5250. So if I'm just hovering over zones, we know that this whole piece is sloped. We can see here 4665, which is what yours should be. And if it's not, uh, take a look, make sure that's correct. And then 5250 out here, 5250 for the parapet. Don't worry about this if it's not quite accurate. We'll get to that in a little bit. Double tap escape for me, just one of the tools that's showing our vertical elevation, our Z elevation. What we're after here is the actual slope. So a spot slope is it's going to give us the spot slope of a roof or any sloped surface here. So if I click on this little spot slope icon, the tool here, it's going to give us very quickly a slope to that existing geometry that we've drawn. You can see I'm just kind of hovering over the roof here. So in this zone, it's sloping towards the middle. And if I just continue, just hover, 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 no slope at the middle means what it means, no slope. So this means it's flat. If I keep coming here, we're sloping the other direction. So we can see almost 2% here. And all you're going to do is click, and then that's going to be live. Similarly, click, and that's going to be live. If we want to move these, we can double tap escape. And then there's a couple things we can do. We can move them using the move tool in the modify panel. So click this and move it around however we see it. We can click to drag, right? Click to drag. I'm not going to do that. And a couple other modifications we can make within the kind of family itself. You might not want this to be so long, so we can shrink it. Or you might want it to be really long. We can extend it. Last thing, we can move this text wherever we want. I would likely advise that you're going to keep it close. You're going to keep it close to that line so that whoever is building your building knows where this reference is taken. If we kind of strip things away from the reference, it can get pretty hard to see what's going on here. That is probably all we need to do for the slope. So it should be pretty straightforward. The second thing is really using some of the annotation tools to get some more definition here. So this is literally a filled region as part of the annotation suite of tools inside of Revit. Like I said, rather than model the geometry, these are more representative of what would be what are called crickets on the roof. We've got the major slopes, and then you might consider just having these smaller pieces of essentially drawn geometry. They are what are called 2D elements, so they're only 2D. They're not modeled, so they won't show up in our 3D views. They'll only show up in the view that they're drawn. This is super important because these will only show up in the view that are drawn. So if I was to open up a site plan, say for instance, which we will inevitably do, you will see that none of those 2D elements are currently in this view. So just be mindful of that when we're using the annotation tool for things like drawing slopes on the roof. So what do I want to do? I want to get something like this little triangle here. How do I do that? So let's just give ourselves another, we're going to draw another triangle. And let's come up here to the annotate ribbon. So we'll come up to the annotate ribbon, click once, and we're looking for the filled region tool. So the filled region tool exists in the detail panel under the annotate ribbon. And if you click the drop-down menu here, you're going to have two things, a filled region or a masking region. We haven't talked about masking regions yet. We might in this course, but we're just not there yet. So filled region is what we're after. It's essentially just a piece of 2D geometry. Filled region, click that. And now we're basically just drawing a shape. So we can draw a shape and it's going to have some sort of pattern fill within it. And here we go. We've got the line style over here, medium lines right here. And we can actually start to draw our shape. So I can start to draw a triangle here and click once, click twice. And similar to some of other pieces here, we need to have a continuous loop in order to make this happen. So it needs to be continuous. We're going to click a third time here to close that loop. And if I just hit check mark here, I'm going to finish the sketch. We're going to see we've got some pattern that's emerged, right? Some pattern has emerged. So we've got, if I just click on back on our family here, our little annotation family, I've got filled region diagonal crosshatch. And this is maybe not what we want. We want it to look more like our version over here with these vertical lines. So there's a couple ways that we can change that. The easiest way for us right now is we're just going to come up here to our drop-down menu. Now, I've already modified the family for us for the best in town exercise. Uh, I'm going to skip over this part, but don't worry about it. So we're going to go to, you should have one that says vertical. I just don't want to confuse anybody. So let's go to vertical, click, and that's going to be sufficient for now. So it's going to look a little bit different than what I've got, but don't worry about that. It's going to look good. Looks the part. Next up, maybe we want to mirror this. So we might mirror the portion here. We can grab our annotation portion here and mirror this across the grid line. Ta-da. And then one more, we'll mirror it again across this grid line. We're starting to look pretty good, right? Pretty close to what we've got in our best in town office example. Yeah, so that is the roof annotation. So we got the slope, got the percentage. Next thing I was thinking that we could do is the roof parapet profile, since we're on the roof itself, might make sense. I believe I've deleted mine just for the purposes of this tutorial, but let's just jump to 3D here. So if yours looks something like this, you're in pretty good shape. We don't yet have our little parapet profile on here. And what we need to do is actually come down to what's called the sweep tool. We're actually creating what's called a sweep all the way around the perimeter of our building. So we're actually creating what's called a sweep all the way around the perimeter of these walls. Now, a sweep needs what's called a profile in order to function. Think of this as a kind of piece of, if you're making noodles, you're making Play-Doh, it's when we're pushing through a kind of form, it's a profile kind of piece that we're pushing through and creating an extrusion along a boundary condition. So we've got this perimeter here. We're going to push that extrusion all the way around this pathway or this path. Some people call it a rail path all the way along the edge of our parapet. So how do we do that? We are going to jump over to, it's a sweep. Give me 1 second here. I can't remember if it's in annotate or it is in architecture. And I'm looking, you know what? In fact, I think it's actually under the, yeah, perfect. It's actually under the wall tool. It's escaped my memory for 1 second here. So within the wall family, we've actually got a kind of, or wall tool, excuse me, wall tool, we've got a couple of different options we can use. So we've done the wall architectural. We have not done a wall by face yet. We will. And then wall sweeps and wall reveals. So a sweep, you can see here, we're extruding that profile along a path or a rail, and that's going to be an additive piece. And then the wall reveal is cutting into the actual wall itself. You can see here in our little example. So the wall sweep is the one we're going to use. Let's click on that. And for us, I've only got one wall sweep in here, but let's make sure that you guys have the correct wall sweep in here. If I just kind of hover over my little parapet here, you can see that something is starting to happen, right? So something is starting to happen. We got to be pretty careful here. You want it to line up with the top of that wall, and we can make some adjustments afterwards, but it could be a little bit tough to get this right on the first go. So for you, you might have a different profile in here. So what I want to do before we even get in here is actually modify the profile for the wall sweep. And we can do that by first, you're going to make sure you download the wall sweep from Revit, and then you're going to get it into our overall model. And then inside, we've got this edit wall sweep. And in our profile up here, we've got, you should see an M Parapet 750 millimeter wide cap precast that we need to get. So we need to get here, click that, hit OK, and then we can actually start to populate our parapet up here. I can see if we click off, we should see our parapet start coming together. I can see one mistake has happened. It looks like this might be going the wrong way. You can see here, we just got to be careful with this. It can be sometimes challenging to make sure we've got the right direction happening on our parapet here. So you can see here, it's not quite right. This should be actually be flipped the other way. Now, if I jump up to our roof level here, let's see if I can do it in here. Doesn't look like I can. What we'll do is I'm going to redo this, but try and be a little bit more careful. So now I'm in the roof plan. I'm just going to delete this. Let's try again. So wall, oh, I have to do it in 3D. So I have to do it in 3D. That's okay. Wall, sweep, try our best. See how challenging this can look sometimes. So what we want to see is that corner edge appear correctly. See how it lines up? We got this miter joint here, and I should be able to get the last one over here. There we go. And that is now looking pretty good. So if you do have that challenge, that's what's going to happen, is that we just got to make sure we get the orientation of the actual parapet cap correct. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. We've got the right geometry in here. If you did miss that step for the overall sweep, what we do is we need to modify the profile and make sure everything is working out. So wall sweep cornice, if I'm just going to show you a different version here. If we change this to literally anything else that's in here, let's change it to default and I'll show you what this looks like, right? So yours may look something like this. We just need to make sure we load that profile and then you should end up with the correct wall sweep type for our profile in here. Whoops, cancel. And what we're looking for is the profile, excuse me, I'm looking at default here. We're looking for the profile, we're looking for 750 M parapet cap 750, and that should be good to go. Okay, so starting to look the part here. Last thing, well, second last thing I wanted to do is look at the Toposolid. So the Toposolid is how we actually get our site into the project here. So super quick, what we could do is we're going to go to the massing and site tab. So massing and type ribbon. We're looking for this little function called Toposolid. So click that. Create from sketch for us. For right now, this is what we're going to do. Create sketch, and we can jump to the actual site plan. So double click on the site and just make it somewhere. It's a flat site, but we're going to draw a rectangle here somewhere. Finish editing that. Just hit don't attach for now, and let's come and let's look at this. So let's jump to 3D here. If I just expand my little section box, if you don't know how to do a section box, that's okay. But we've got a little site happening. So if I was to jump to a section, what you'll notice is that this grading is actually only 1,000. So what we need to do is we actually need to drop this a little bit. And I've already gone ahead and created an 8-meter deep Toposolid. But let's go ahead and just double check how deep we would want it and what's happening here. So in our section view, we can see two things happening. First is that it's cutting through the whole building. Guys, I'm getting the call. So So super quick. What we're going to do is we're going to edit the type here. So we can see we've got 1,000 in here. What we'd like to do is make it 8,000. So we're going to make this 8,000 deep. Hit that little edit type icon. And remember, first thing we can do is duplicate. So I'd like this to be 8,000. So let's duplicate this, make it 8,000, hit OK. And now we're going to change the structure. So we're actually going to change how deep this is. So we can see right now it's 1,000. So its default thickness as 1,000. Let's change this from 1,000 to 8,000. And the challenge here is that we're only showing Earth. That's okay for this exercise. I just wanted us to get a little familiarity with the tool. So how do we use it? How do we get in here? Let's hit OK. Hit OK again. And that's okay. So we're going to see a couple things are happening now. We can see, oh no, I've got all this soil hanging out inside of my floor. So, the basement is now full of soil. Sometimes that's good. In this case, that's bad. So what do we need to do? We actually need to cut away the kind of soil that's existing in our basement. We used to have something called a building pad. That's since been changed in Revit for whatever reason. They've eliminated that tool. I found it pretty intuitive, but that's okay. So what we'll do instead is, this is pretty complicated part here. So if you do have trouble, just take a look at the video. I'm going to try and keep it simple, but I understand this might be a little complicated for some of us. So we jump to the basement floor level here. What we're going to do, jump to the basement, and we're actually going to do what's called a modeled in place component. And this can be a little complicated, but let's just go ahead and try it. What we're trying to do is we're actually going to cut the model geometry away from our overall grading here. So architecture, component, model in place. So we before we had our place component for things like the toilets and the sinks, all that fun stuff. We're going to hit model in place, click that. You're going to get another menu. So for us, we actually need to come down here all the way down to Toposolid. Let's go down to Toposolid, hit OK. Toposolid 1 is fine. We're going to give it a little name, hit OK. And now what we've actually got is, if you remember from our parametric modeling situation, we've got some voids. So we're actually going to do a void into the ground of a certain depth. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a void extrusion here. I'm going to draw a little rectangle all the way at the edge of our kind of foundation wall across the building here. So across the building. If I jump to 3D here, we should see it's something like this. I hit a little check mark here. And you should see these little tags. So I finished the sketch. I did not finish the model. So let's make sure we don't finish this model. We need to be in the tool still in order to make this cut work. A couple things are happening. You can see these shape handles. So we got to pull these where we need them. For us, what's going to be important is we've done it in plan, but now we also need to do it in our section. So let's just double check our elevator section. So I can see here this is actually quite a bit too low. So let's take this shape handle, bring it all the way up, snap it to the floor here, take this all the way up to just at our floor, jump to the elevator and stair section. This is looking pretty good. Okay. Jump to 3D. And now we should be able to finish our model. Oh, hit cancel, hit cancel. So actually, in fact, what we're going to do now is cut the geometry. Like that. So what we're going to do is, rather than hit finish model, if you hit that finish model button, you're going to end up with an error. We don't want that error. So cut geometry, click on the Toposolid, and then you're going to have to try and find our void extrusion. You can see here, I'm just hovering and I'm going to find that void extrusion. Boom. Click it, and now we should see an empty floor. Looking pretty good. Hit that finish model here. And this is going to be pretty close to where I was thinking we would get to for the Toposolid. So if it's looking, not exactly how you want it, that's okay. I just wanted us to get to that tool. Again, maybe we want to cut out the footings here from the overall grading. So let's hit cut. We're going to cut this away from, whoops, other way. So we actually have to cut the Toposolid first and then cut the footing. So the thing we're cutting, thing we're using to cut. It's probably the simplest way. Thing we're cutting, thing we're using to cut. Thing we're cutting, thing we're using to cut, so on. So you can see here, it would be really great if we could just cut out this. Doesn't look like it's going to let us. But yeah, so that is the Toposolid tool here. Hopefully this has been helpful. The last thing I wanted to cover super quick is in the main floor level. Quite a few people had this question, was when I'm hovering over my curtain wall, how do I get my door? How do I get my door into the overall wall here? The curtain wall family does its own jam. We can actually just tab select. So we actually got to tab, 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 and find the panel. So remember our tab key. It's going to do that again super quick. So we're hovering over the curtain wall, tab, 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 click. And then we can actually, from our type selector, we're looking for this curtain wall door. So we have to make sure we're looking for a curtain wall door. It's not a conventional door. This is a big concern from a lot of people. So let's make sure we get that correct. If I click this, now I got a door. Magical. So I was going to do printing, but in fact, I've actually got to get to the hospital now, guys. If you have trouble printing, I'll see if I've got time to do a quick little tutorial on printing over the weekend. But as I said, I have a situation I got to go attend to. And you know what that means. So I'll see you on Tuesday virtually. And I'm going to try and get to our little exercise for printing. If you can't print for for Sunday night, if you can't figure out how to do the PDFs, just upload the Revit model with all of our sheets set up and you'll be totally fine. So if I get to it, that's great. You guys should know how to print PDFs, but sorry, you should know how to print PDFs as provided by instruction by me. But if you don't, that's okay. And we'll try to get to it next Tuesday. Okay. Still do on Sunday though. So still do on Sunday. If you can't get the PDFs working, upload the Revit model and that should be good to go. Thank you so much for all your time and talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.